Joanne Rich. In 1961, 31-year-old Joanne Rich lived in Lincoln, Massachusetts with her husband, 4-year-old daughter, and 2-year-old son. On October the 24th, Joanne's husband was out of town and her daughter went to a neighbor's house. When the girl returned home, Joanne was gone and her infant son was sleeping unattended. There was blood in the kitchen and a trail of it ran outside to Joanne's car in the driveway. The phone was ripped out of the wall and the phone book was open to the emergency numbers section. A bloody fingerprint was also found which could not be matched to anyone. All signs pointed to an abduction, but some strange eyewitness sightings complicated this scenario. That afternoon, a neighbor saw a dazed-looking Joanne running outside her house, but assumed that she was chasing one of her children. Later that day, motorists saw a woman resembling Joanne walking along Route 128. Even though the woman appeared to be bloody and disorientated, no one assisted her and she was never found. Since Route 128 was under construction at the time, there was some speculation that she fell into an excavation pit and was eventually buried under asphalt. Things got even more complicated when investigators discovered that Joanne had checked out over 25 library books about murders and disappearances throughout the summer. One of the books chronicled the story of a woman who disappeared and left blood smears behind. Since the Rich family had moved to Lincoln from New York City 6 months earlier, and Joanne gave up a publishing career to raise her children, one theory was that she became unhappy with her domestic life and decided to stage her own disappearance. If that theory is true, Joanne has managed to stay off the radar for decades. Misty Murray. On May the 31st of 1995, 16-year-old Misty Murray told her parents that she was attending a band practice in her hometown of Goderich, Ontario, Canada. Misty never returned home and her friend said that there was no band practice that night. Misty was adopted, but since she'd recently made contact with her biological mother, there was speculation that she might have run away. However, the investigation would eventually focus on Misty's adoptive father, Stephen Murray. Since Stephen had been seen boating on Lake Huron on the day of Misty's disappearance, authorities came to believe that Stephen murdered her and dumped her body in the water. Even though Misty's body could not be found, Stephen was charged with her murder. However, the case against Stephen was complicated by 97 eyewitness sightings of Misty which took place after Stephen was alleged to have killed her. In the weeks following Misty's disappearance, several teenagers who personally knew her claimed to have spoken with Misty in Goderich and in the nearby town of Clinton. There would also be sightings of Misty in Toronto and London, Ontario. According to witnesses in London, Misty had become involved in drugs and prostitution and left town with her pimp once her disappearance started getting publicity. In spite of these sightings, Stephen Murray still went on trial for his adoptive daughter's murder, but the case against him was so faulty that it only took 45 minutes for the jury to acquit him. The police faced heavy criticism for the investigation and were hit with a lawsuit from Misty's family, who claimed that they focused too much on Stephen and failed to pursue any leads suggesting that Misty was still alive. She remains a missing person over 20 years later. Elizabeth Campbell. On the evening of April the 25th, 1988, 20-year-old college student Elizabeth Campbell was at her boyfriend's residence in Killeen, Texas, when the couple got into an argument. When Elizabeth's boyfriend refused her request to drive her home, she left on her own even though she lived 50 kilometers away. At some point, Elizabeth ran into a fellow college student who agreed to take her as far as Cooper's Cove, where he dropped her off at a convenience store. Since Elizabeth was still a long way from home, she phoned her boyfriend to come and pick her up, but he once again refused. Elizabeth's time at the store would be the last confirmed sighting of her. She never returned home and her family reported her missing. 6 days after Elizabeth's disappearance, there were 2 separate alleged sightings of her at a convenience store 137 kilometers away. In both cases, she looked very nervous and was in the company of an unidentified man who wouldn't let go of her arm. 2 months later, there was another sighting of a nervous-looking woman resembling Elizabeth at a gas station 240 kilometers away. The similarity of all these sightings led to some speculation that Elizabeth was abducted and forced into prostitution. In another bizarre turn of events, Elizabeth's purse would be discovered in the possession of the Crockett County Sheriff's Department in Ozona in 1992. It had apparently been found near an interstate approximately 290 kilometers from where Elizabeth disappeared, but the police did not have an exact record of when the purse was found or who turned it in. Unfortunately, in spite of all these leads, Elizabeth Campbell has never been found. Rachel Pratt. On the evening of January 16, 1995, 15-year-old Rachel Pratt was watching a movie with her brother at her family's residence in Garden City, Kansas. When Rachel's mom returned home at approximately 2 a.m., Rachel's brother had fallen asleep, but Rachel herself was gone. Other than her jacket, she left behind all her personal belongings. At the time, Rachel was going through a difficult situation. After she'd been caught shoplifting a home pregnancy test, Rachel's family learned that she was pregnant. The father of Rachel's child was her boyfriend, an 18-year-old high school senior. This case would further be complicated by an odd sighting of Rachel shortly thereafter. 5 days after she disappeared, a group of girls claimed to have seen Rachel talking on a payphone outside of a local grocery store. Rachel's boyfriend was with her, and after she handed the phone to him, she went over to the girls and asked them for a ride. When they turned her down, Rachel walked into the store, and that's the last time she was ever seen. Since Rachel was underage and her boyfriend was legally an adult, he was charged with aggravated indecent liberties with a child shortly before her disappearance. Rachel was set to testify as a witness against her boyfriend, but after she went missing, the charges against him were dropped. Naturally, this caused authorities to zero in on the boyfriend as a suspect, but he has always maintained his innocence and denied being with Rachel during the alleged sighting at the grocery store. There is no evidence that Rachel ever gave birth to her unborn child, and the circumstances behind her disappearance are still unknown. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Until tomorrow, goodbye.